10 years of marriage ended with 5 words I never saw coming: let's open our relationship. What followed was a whirlwind of betrayal, revenge, and an unexpected chance at starting over, proving that sometimes, the end is just the beginning. I never imagined I'd be sharing something so personal, but here I am, laying out 10 years of marriage like it's some kind of group therapy. You think you know someone, don't you? You trust them, you build a life together, and then one day they throw something at you that shakes your entire foundation. I never expected my wife to cheat on me, not in the way she did, at least. When you hear the word cheating, your mind goes straight to the clichés, right? Late-night texts, whispered conversations, sneaking around in the dark. But Lisa, my wife of 10 years, flipped the script. She came right out with it, bold as could be, and suggested we open up our marriage, like she was doing me a favor. Is that even normal? Am I losing it for thinking that's completely wrong? I thought marriage meant being partners, not, whatever this is supposed to be. I'm no writer, so don't expect some polished, neatly wrapped story. I'm just a regular guy scrolling Reddit like everyone else. And now, here I am, venting my marital mess to strangers online because, honestly, I don't know what else to do. Maybe someone out there has been through something similar. Maybe laying it all out will help me make some sense of this chaos. Let me start with the basics. My name's Mark. I'm 38, your average guy in pretty much every way. Lisa, my wife, is 35. We've been married for a decade. We got together when we were young, full of energy and hope, and everything just felt right. We had that spark, the kind that makes you feel like you've won the lottery. Lisa was everything I'd ever wanted: smart, funny, gorgeous. She had this way of lighting up a room that made me fall for her every single day. But now, I'm here, questioning it all. What happened to us? What happened to her? Or maybe, what happened to me? Lisa was everything I could have ever asked for in a partner, and for a while, we were amazing together. But 10 years is a long time, and life has a way of wearing things down. People change, and so did we. Things between us cooled off. I won't sugarcoat it, we grew tired of each other. It wasn't like we hated each other, it was far from that. But when you share a life for that long, same bed, same bathroom, splitting bills and groceries, you lose a bit of that magic. Somewhere along the way, it all became routine. And yeah, the sleep. That suffered, too. At first, I didn't think much of it. We were both busy with work, life, and everything else in between. But then months went by, and the bedroom grew completely silent. When we did make an effort, it felt mechanical, like we were crossing something off a to-do list instead of connecting. I'm not proud of it, but there were nights when I'd just lie there, staring at the ceiling, wondering if this was how things were going to be forever. I wanted to fix it. I figured maybe Lisa was going through something she hadn't opened up about, so I suggested she see a psychologist. Maybe a professional could help her unpack whatever was weighing her down. To my surprise, she didn't resist, she agreed almost immediately. For a moment, I thought this might be the turning point, that we'd finally start working through the mess and find our way back to each other. But no. Those therapy sessions did absolutely nothing, or at least, nothing helpful. If anything, things just got stranger between us. I couldn't tell if she was genuinely engaging in those sessions or just going through the motions to appease me. Whatever it was, it didn't seem to be helping. Then, things took a sharp nosedive after she started spending time with Amanda again. And Amanda, don't even get me started on her. I never liked Amanda. She's one of those people who thinks she's got life all figured out because she's free-spirited, or whatever label she wants to throw around. Every time she's been around, I've gotten this vibe, like she's quietly judging Lisa and me, sizing up our relationship and finding it lacking. It's hard to explain, but I've always felt like she looked at us as if we were some outdated couple stuck in the past. And let me tell you, her views on marriage, they don't help. Amanda's divorced, which doesn't exactly surprise me, given how she talks about relationships. To her, marriage is nothing more than an old-fashioned institution that people cling to because they're too scared to be alone. I've heard her say it outright, with this smug tone like she's the enlightened one. So, when Lisa started spending more and more time with her, I knew something wasn't right. I just didn't realize how bad it was going to get. One night, after Lisa had been with Amanda all day, she came home, and I could tell right away that something was off. She had this strange look on her face, like she was nervous but trying to fake her way through it with some forced confidence. It was unsettling. Then she sat me down on the couch, all serious-like, and started with those dreaded words, "Mark, I've been thinking about our marriage." You know, when someone starts a sentence like that, it's never going to end well. I felt this knot tighten in my stomach, but I tried to stay composed and hear her out. That's when she dropped the bomb. She suggested we open our marriage. For a moment, I thought it had to be a joke, a bad one, sure, but a joke nonetheless. But no, Lisa was completely serious. She laid it out like it was the most practical solution in the world, like she was offering me some enlightened way to save what we had. She tried to rationalize it, saying it wouldn't be cheating because I'd know about it. I'd know who she was seeing, where she was going, and when, like those details would somehow make it all okay. She used words like freedom and trust, twisting them into something unrecognizable, as if those were the pillars of what she was proposing. I just sat there, stunned. I sat there, staring at Lisa, trying to make sense of the words coming out of her mouth. My wife, the woman I'd built a life with over the past decade, was essentially asking for my permission to sleep with other people. She framed it as something logical, even considerate, but to me, it felt like nothing short of a betrayal. How was that not cheating? How was this supposed to fix anything between us? I couldn't wrap my head around it. It felt like she'd already made up her mind and was just waiting for me to say it was okay. I managed to choke out a question: why? Why now? Why this? Her response made my stomach turn. She said Amanda had opened her eyes, helped her see things differently. According to Lisa, we were stuck in a rut, and this was the way to break out of it. And then she said something I'll never forget: it's not betrayal if you know about it. As if being upfront about wanting to sleep with other men was supposed to make it hurt less. As if honesty in delivering that kind of blow would somehow soften the impact. The whole conversation fell apart after that. I was too angry, too blindsided to think clearly, and Lisa was too convinced she was right to see my side. We didn't shout or scream, but the air between us felt heavy enough to crush both of us. Eventually, without resolving anything, we just got up and went to separate rooms, like strangers awkwardly coexisting under the same roof. She's probably in the other room right now, texting Amanda, brainstorming new ways to turn our marriage into some kind of open-door free-for-all. And after that night, after she dropped the open relationship bomb on me, things didn't just go back to normal. How could they? Lisa, somehow, seemed to believe that everything was settled. It was like, in her mind, my lack of a dramatic reaction was as good as a yes. Meanwhile, I was still reeling, trying to figure out what the hell had happened to us. The weeks that followed were a blur of tension and suffocating silence. But what made it worse, what broke something inside me, was that Lisa didn't just stop at suggesting the idea. She started going out more. And it wasn't just Amanda anymore. No, she was going on dates. Actual, real dates with other men. I don't know what I was thinking, letting it happen. Maybe I wasn't thinking at all. Maybe I froze, too overwhelmed to take action. Part of me wanted to pack my things, walk out, and leave it all behind. But then there was another part of me, a quieter, more desperate part, that wasn't ready to give up just yet. I was still in shock, trying to make sense of how we had ended up here. Lisa would leave the house dressed to the nines, more put together than I'd seen her in months, with a cloud of perfume hanging in the air, and she'd just go. Like this was completely normal now. Like it was something I was supposed to accept. Every time the door closed behind her, I felt a wave of disgust, not just at her but at myself, too. I wanted to scream, to call her out, to demand answers, but I couldn't even summon the energy to fight. Instead, I stayed home, nursing a beer and stewing in my frustration. The idea of leaving her was always there in the back of my mind, looming larger each day. But for some reason, I hadn't acted on it. Maybe it was the weight of all those years together, the history we shared, or maybe I was just afraid. Too much of a coward to be the one to make the first move and bring it all crashing down. One night, after Lisa had gone out yet again, I hit my breaking point. I couldn't keep sitting there, drowning in my thoughts. I needed to talk to someone who wouldn't sugarcoat it or tell me what I wanted to hear. So, I picked up my phone and texted Sam. Sam and I have been friends since college. He's the one guy I can always count on to give me the unvarnished truth, no matter how hard it is to hear. When I explained what was going on, he immediately suggested meeting up at our usual spot, a rundown dive bar with sticky floors, a worn-out pool table in the back, and dim lighting that made everyone look like they had something to hide. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours. When I walked in, Sam was already at the bar, nursing a drink. He's the kind of guy who always has this half-smirk on his face, like he knows something you don't. He's never been married, never really believed in the whole concept, so I wasn't entirely sure how he'd react to everything I was about to unload on him. But I needed someone to listen, someone who could help me make sense of the chaos swirling in my head. I slid onto the stool next to him and ordered a beer, bracing myself for whatever came next. I slid onto the bar stool next to Sam, ordered a whiskey, and let out a sigh so heavy it felt like it carried the weight of the last few weeks. "What's going on, man? You look like," he started, not even bothering to glance my way, his attention still fixed on the drink in his hand. I didn't even let him finish. I just dove in, laying everything bare. I told him about Lisa dropping the open relationship bomb, about how she was going out on actual dates with other men, and how I felt completely paralyzed, stuck in a situation I couldn't make sense of, let alone fix. Sam listened intently, nodding here and there, his usual smirk fading the more I talked. By the time I was done, he just sat there for a moment, looking at me like he was sizing up the mess I'd just dropped in his lap. Finally, he leaned back and said, "Man, you need to get the hell out of that marriage. She's walking all over you. Divorce her, take half of everything, and move on." I can't say I was surprised. It's exactly what I expected him to say, and honestly, it's what I wanted to hear. But before I could respond, he took another sip of his drink and leaned in closer. "But," he added, his voice dropping a notch, "before you do that, why don't you make things a little more interesting?" I raised an eyebrow, unsure of what he was getting at. "What do you mean?" Sam's smirk returned, sly and knowing. "You want to get back at her, don't you?" I didn't answer right away, so he took that as his cue to keep going. "Look, you can't just roll over and let her have all the fun. Why don't you go out, find someone, and bring her home tonight? Show Lisa what it feels like to be on the other side." I blinked, caught completely off guard by how casually he suggested it. "You mean, bring a girl home? Like, for revenge?" He shrugged, that smirk creeping up again. "Why not? She's already made it crystal clear she doesn't give a about your marriage anymore. You want to leave her? Fine. But before you go, make her feel what you've been feeling. She's out there living it up while you're just sitting at home, stewing in your misery. Take advantage of the situation. Hit her where it hurts." At first, I didn't know what to say. I just stared at him, trying to process how easily he'd tossed out the idea, like it was no big deal. Like revenge was the natural next step. The idea of getting even was tempting. Imagining Lisa's face if I walked in with another woman was almost enough to make me say yes right then and there. Maybe Sam had a point. Why should I sit at home, wallowing in misery, while Lisa was out, exploring her freedom? If she wanted an open relationship, maybe it was time to show her exactly what that looked like. I sighed, finishing off my whiskey in one go. All right. Let's do this. Sam's grin spread wide. Now you're talking. Let's hit the club and find you someone. We left the bar, and after a couple of shots to loosen up, I started feeling less like the guy left behind and more like someone ready to reclaim the night. Why not? Lisa was out doing her thing. It was time for me to do mine. When we got to the club, everything felt surreal. The place was packed, bodies moving in rhythm to the heavy bass, neon lights flashing through the haze. I hadn't been to a club like this in years. It felt like I'd stepped into another universe, leaving all the chaos with Lisa far behind. For the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't thinking about my crumbling marriage, the past decade, or anything else weighing me down. In that moment, none of it mattered. And then I saw her. She was at the bar, her dress hugging her curves just right, a drink in her hand, and a smile that lit up the room. I watched her for a while, trying to find a reason, or the courage, to approach her. After a few more drinks, I didn't need an excuse. I weaved through the crowd, leaning in to say something that was probably more charm than sense. I can't even remember what I said, it didn't matter. She smiled back, and that was all the permission I needed. We started dancing. At first, it was casual, just two strangers caught up in the music and the atmosphere. But as the drinks kept flowing, we got closer. Her hand slid over my chest, my arms found her waist, and soon, the rest of the club faded into the background. Before I knew it, we were stumbling into the men's room, laughing like teenagers sneaking around. Once we were inside, she pushed me against the wall and kissed me, hard. In that moment, I couldn't think about anything else. Not Lisa, not my marriage, not the disaster waiting for me back home. Everything blurred together, and for that brief, reckless stretch of time, the rest of the world didn't exist. We were in a club bathroom, of all places, not exactly the setting for romance. But none of that mattered in the moment. I was caught up in the intensity of it, caught up in her. We just went for it, right then and there. When it was over, we stood there for a moment, trying to catch our breath. The haze of what we'd just done started to fade, and reality began creeping back in. She looked at me, a little curious and a little confused. "So, what now?" she asked, tilting her head. I hadn't exactly thought this far ahead. I hadn't even really answered the question for myself. But as I stood there, an idea started forming, a reckless, alcohol-fueled plan that felt both ridiculous and tempting at the same time. I looked her in the eye, feeling a strange mix of boldness and desperation. "I've got an idea," I said, a grin tugging at my lips. She crossed her arms, leaning against the counter, clearly intrigued but still processing the fact that I was married. "What kind of idea?" she asked, her tone hovering between amusement and disbelief. I took a deep breath, the alcohol making me bolder than I had any right to be. "Come back to my place. Let's do it again, but this time, in front of her." For a second, she just stared at me, blinking like she hadn't heard me right. "Well, that's a first," she said, laughing a little. "I've never been asked to help someone get revenge on their wife before." I shrugged, giving her a cocky grin. "There's a first time for everything, right?" She thought about it for a moment, then downed the rest of her drink like she was sealing the deal. Her decision made, she looked back at me with a playful smirk. "All right," she said. "Let's do it. Sounds like fun." And just like that, the plan was set. I didn't stop to think twice about what I was doing or the consequences that were sure to follow. All I cared about was getting back at Lisa, making her feel the kind of humiliation I'd been drowning in for weeks. The drive back to the house felt electric, adrenaline pumping through my veins. My heart was racing, not just from what had happened at the club but from what was about to go down. When we pulled up, the house was dark and quiet. Lisa was already asleep, or at least I thought she was. I had no idea how the night would unfold, but I wasn't backing out now. Julia, she'd told me her name at some point during the chaos, followed me inside. There was something about her, the way she carried herself, that made it clear she was fully on board. To her, this wasn't just about me, it was a wild, almost thrilling adventure. She was leaning into the drama, and I wasn't about to stop her. We didn't waste any time. We moved to the living room, the silence of the house amplifying every sound, every movement. That's when Lisa appeared. She'd come down the stairs, her face illuminated by the faint glow of a hallway light. Her eyes locked on us, and in that instant, I could see everything: horror, disbelief, betrayal. For a split second, I almost regretted it. Almost. I almost felt bad. Almost. What the hell is going on? Lisa's voice sliced through the silence like a blade, sharp and furious. But neither of us stopped. Julia didn't hesitate for a second, and I just locked eyes with Lisa, feeling a rush of satisfaction like I hadn't in years. Revenge, raw and unfiltered, was playing out right in front of her, and for a brief moment, it was everything I'd wanted. Lisa's face contorted in anger, and she took a step toward us, like she was going to pull us apart herself. But I raised my hand, palm out, stopping her mid-step. That single motion froze her in place. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I was in control, not her ridiculous idea of an open marriage. The rest of the night was a haze of intensity and chaos. Reckless? Absolutely. But in that moment, it felt like the release I'd been desperate for. Julia and I didn't stop, not even as Lisa stormed out of the room in tears. Everything about the night was unhinged, a whirlwind of passion and raw emotion, the likes of which I hadn't experienced in years. By the time the first rays of sunlight began creeping through the blinds, the adrenaline started to wear off. Julia got dressed and gave me one last playful smile before leaving, scribbling her number on a scrap of paper she left on the counter. When the door clicked shut behind her, reality crashed down like a wave. I had blown up my entire life in the span of a single night. I couldn't even fully process what had just happened: revenge, the fallout, all of it. I went upstairs, finding Lisa sitting on the bed. Her eyes were red and puffy from crying, but her expression had hardened into something cold and unrecognizable. She didn't even look up when I stepped inside. I stood there for a moment, staring at her. This was the woman I'd built my life with, the person I thought I'd grow old with. But now, looking at her, all I saw was a stranger. "I'm filing for divorce," I said, my voice steady and flat. Lisa didn't flinch. She didn't argue or beg. She just nodded, her lips pressed into a tight line, like she'd been expecting it all along. And that was it. No screaming, no dramatic confrontation. Just an end to a decade of marriage, as cold and abrupt as the moment she'd suggested opening it up. Afterward, as I sat alone in the quiet house, it all hit me. The divorce. The insane revenge. The fact that I'd detonated my entire life in the course of a single night. But there was one thing I couldn't shake, one thought that kept resurfacing. Julia. She'd left her number on the counter, and no matter how much I told myself to focus on the mess I'd made, I couldn't stop thinking about her, about the wildness of that night, the spark I hadn't felt in years. Part of me knew it was just another layer of chaos waiting to unfold. But still, I couldn't ignore it. I don't know why, but after staring at my phone for what felt like an eternity, I decided to dial Julia's number. Maybe it was the need for some kind of normalcy after the chaos of last night, or maybe I just needed to see her again, to talk without the wildness of it all looming over us. The phone rang, and when she picked up, her voice was light, teasing. "Didn't expect to hear from you this soon. This isn't another revenge scheme, is it?" I chuckled nervously, the embarrassment creeping in. "No, nothing like that. I figured we could talk like, I don't know, normal people for a change." There was a pause on the line, and for a moment, I wondered if she'd brush me off. But then she replied, "Okay, coffee sounds good." We met at a small cafe not far from my place. It was the kind of quiet, unassuming spot where the madness of the last 24 hours could feel a little more distant, like it had happened to someone else entirely. When she walked in, I felt an odd mix of relief and awkwardness. After all, the circumstances of our meeting were anything but typical. Julia caught my gaze and gave me a small, almost sheepish smile. "So, last night was something," she said, sliding into the chair across from me. I nodded, laughing awkwardly. "Yeah, that's one way to put it. I'm not usually that guy, you know." "Neither am I," she admitted quickly, taking a sip of her coffee. "Honestly, I wasn't even supposed to be there. I just kind of ended up at the club by accident." "By accident?" I raised an eyebrow, suddenly curious. She sighed, leaning back in her chair. "Yeah. My boyfriend, well, ex-boyfriend now, dumped me a few days ago. We'd been together for a while, and out of nowhere, he tells me he's moving to another state and doesn't want to do long distance. Didn't even bother trying to make it work." "That's rough," I said, genuinely meaning it. "Breakups, they bad." She smiled faintly at that, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Yeah, they do." For a moment, the conversation stalled. I wasn't sure how to steer things from there, but I knew I couldn't just leave things on the surface. She'd been honest about her life, and it was time for me to do the same. I took a deep breath and leaned forward. "I told Lisa I'm filing for divorce," I said, the words feeling strange and heavy as they left my mouth. I watched Julia closely as I said it. Her eyes widened slightly, her expression a mix of surprise and curiosity. "Really? That was quick," she said, leaning in slightly. "Yeah, I guess last night was the final straw," I replied, running a hand through my hair. I can't say there weren't signs, but I ignored them for too long. And now, well, here we are. We sat in silence for a moment, both of us lost in our thoughts. I wasn't sure what I'd expected from this coffee meeting. Closure? A casual chat? Whatever it was, I hadn't anticipated feeling this strange connection to her. Julia wasn't just some random girl from the club anymore. She had her own story, her own struggles. Somehow, in this mess of bad timing and emotional chaos, our paths had crossed. Maybe it was the right moment. Maybe it was the wrong one. But it felt significant. As I sat there, I felt something stir inside me, sympathy, understanding, maybe even the beginning of something more. It was unexpected, but for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel so weighed down. "You know," I said, breaking the silence, "it feels like this huge weight I've been carrying around for years is finally lifting off my shoulders. Lisa and we were done long before she suggested the open relationship. I think I knew it deep down, but I was too stuck in the routine to admit it. Now that it's over, or almost over, I can finally breathe again. I can focus on the things that actually matter, like building something real with someone new." Julia gave me a soft smile, the kind that said she understood more than I'd even spoken aloud. And somehow, what started as a wild, impulsive night has turned into something unexpected. Julia and I have grown closer since then. By closer, I mean we've been living together for a while now. It's fast, sure, but it feels right. Of course, Lisa didn't take it well when she found out. She went off the rails, spreading rumors, saying nasty things behind my back, and even showing up at my place a couple of times to cause a scene. It was ugly, but Julia didn't let any of it get to her. And, honestly, neither did I. We've built something solid, something Lisa's antics couldn't touch. If anything, I think Lisa's inability to shake us made her even angrier. Now, I'm looking ahead. Sharing all of this here on Reddit has helped me more than I can put into words. Your comments, advice, and encouragement helped me through some of the hardest moments of my life, and for that, I'll always be grateful. As for the future, I'm genuinely excited for the first time in a long time. Julia and I are in a good place, and I can finally look forward to what's next, free from the weight of the past. I'm genuinely looking forward to what comes next. That being said, I'm always open to advice. Life has a way of surprising you, as I've learned the hard way, so if anyone has tips for navigating a fresh start after a messy divorce, I'm all ears. Thanks again, everyone, for your support, it's meant more than you know. Now for the big news, Julia and I are expecting a daughter. She's due in just a couple of months, and I can hardly believe it. I'm already over the moon about becoming a dad. If you'd asked me a year ago, I never would have imagined this is where my life would be, but here we are, starting a family together. It feels surreal, in the best possible way. On top of that, I've been pouring myself into a new small business I started. I've always had an entrepreneurial itch, and after everything that happened, I figured there was no better time to take a leap and focus on something I'm passionate about. It's been keeping me busy and giving me a sense of purpose, which I really needed after everything that went down. As for Lisa, well, let's just say things haven't worked out so well for her. From what I've heard, there've been some serious consequences from the lifestyle she chose. Word around town is that she caught something, a venereal disease that's difficult to treat. It's not something you'd wish on anyone, but it seems like her choices have finally caught up with her. On top of that, there are rumors about her, the kind that spread like wildfire in small towns. People talk, and it sounds like she's been having a rough time of it. Still, I'm not here to dwell on her downfall. I've moved on, and my focus is on the future. It feels amazing to have a fresh start with someone who truly understands me. Julia has been a rock through all of this, and now, with a baby on the way, I feel like I'm stepping into a completely new chapter of my life, one that I'm finally excited about. Looking back on everything that's happened, it's hard to believe how much has changed in such a short amount of time. If you told me a year ago that I'd be sitting here, preparing for fatherhood with Julia by my side, I wouldn't have believed you. I was trapped in a marriage that had long since run its course, shackled by fear and the comfort of routine. And yet, here I am, freer, lighter, and more alive than I've been in years. But if there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that life doesn't just hand you clarity, it drags you through the fire to find it. I thought Lisa's betrayal would destroy me, and for a while, it did. But what I see now is that it wasn't just an ending, it was a reckoning. A chance to confront everything I'd been too afraid to face about myself, my marriage, and what I really want out of life. Still, it wasn't easy. Even now, I can't say it feels like some neatly wrapped conclusion. There are scars. The nights when I questioned everything. The humiliation. The anger. I see Lisa's face sometimes, in my memories, from that night when she saw me and Julia together. The betrayal in her eyes, the raw pain, I won't lie, there are moments when it still makes my chest tighten. And yet, I know I didn't do this to punish her. It wasn't revenge, not really. It was survival. The whispers about her around town. I don't revel in them. Not anymore. She made her choices, and so did I. And as much as her actions tore me apart, there's a part of me that still wishes her well, or at least wishes her peace. Because without Lisa and the storm we weathered, I might never have found this version of myself. And then there's Julia. She came into my life like a wildfire, unexpected, untamed, and consuming. What started as a chaotic, reckless night turned into something I never saw coming. She brought me back to life, reminded me of the person I could be, and now, with our daughter on the way, I finally understand what it means to build something real. Something worth holding on to. As I sit here, writing this, I can hear Julia laughing softly in the other room. Her voice carries a warmth I haven't known in years, and it hits me, this is the life I've been waiting for. The one I was too afraid to claim. And for the first time, I'm not looking back anymore. Life is unpredictable, messy, and sometimes brutal. But it also gives you the chance to rebuild. To fight for what you deserve. And if there's one thing I know for sure, it's this: the past may shape you, but it doesn't have to define you. Here's to whatever comes next.